do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indie Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indie Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome into the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday. Hopefully you had a nice weekend, a nice 4th of July. I am back. I was in Chicago. Got to go to a Cubs game. That was fun. I enjoyed that. Did a whole bunch of other stuff with my wife. It was good. Had a really good time in Chicago, except for the driving. The driving was brutal. When we go back, because I'm sure we will at some point, we're not going to drive everywhere like we did this weekend. Just too many idiots driving around on the streets of Chicago. But no idiots here in Indy. It's just filled with all these smart and lovely, lovely people. One of those people being Kevin Pritchard, who finally spoke to the media yesterday after the end of the Indiana Pacers season. Talked a little bit about Miles Turner. Talked a little bit about Tyrese Halliburton and his Achilles and kind of everything going on with that. And that's where I want to start today. Kevin Pritchard confirmed yesterday that Tyrese Halliburton isn't going to play next year, which isn't surprising to anyone.
I have no doubt that he will be back better than ever. You know, the surgery went well. It was a little higher. It gets a little bit more blood to that. He will not play next year, though. We would not jeopardize that now. So he don't get any hopes up that he will play. But again, we'll have some guys, and hopefully they'll have some opportunities to grow. And when he gets back, that'll be cherry on top, I guess.
Cherry on top, I guess. Kevin Pritchard right there, Pacers president of basketball operations, talking about Tyrese Halliburton. And just, little Google doctor right here for you. He mentioned the Achilles tear on Tyrese Halliburton being a little higher up on his Achilles. I figured he mentioned that because it's important, because it is important. More blood flow to that area that can help reduce the rehab time by a month or so. That's obviously important. It doesn't matter, though. Tyrese Halliburton isn't playing one way or the other, and that injury led to or impacted many decisions made by the Indiana Pacers. As soon as Tyrese Halliburton isn't going to play, you know that your chances of making it back to the NBA Finals or potentially winning the NBA Finals, they pretty much disappear unless Cam Jones or any one of these other guys end up just being an absolute stud immediately. And the fact that, you don't want to pay the tax in a year where you can't win the finals is normal. It's reasonable. It makes a lot of sense. The Boston Celtics are doing the exact same thing. They are cleaning house, getting underneath the tax, and then they'll start spending money again as soon as Jason Tatum comes back from his Achilles injury. It's a very normal thing, what we've seen the Indiana Pacers do. But sadly, in an effort to avoid paying the luxury tax, the Pacers had to let Miles Turner go. Right? It's part of it. And Kevin Pritchard was asked by the media yesterday, what went into that deal? Were you surprised by it? All of those different sorts of questions about Miles Turner. And here's what Pacers president of basketball operations, Kevin Pritchard, had to say about Miles Turner and his leaving the Indiana Pacers.
I don't want to get into the specifics of Miles, because the truth is he gave 10 great years here. I loved having him be here. I hope I'm friends with him for a long time. I know this, that Herb Simon and Stephen Rails and the Simon family were fully prepared to go deep into the tax to keep him. And we really wanted to do that. And we were negotiating in good faith. But what happens in this league is sometimes you're negotiating, but because a guy is unrestricted, he has the right to say, that's the offer I want. I'm going to take it, and that's best for my family. And again, we were in good faith negotiations. It was a little surprising that, how Milwaukee created that. I don't know if, we always say in our conference room, there's cap teams that have cap space, and there's shadow teams that have cap space. You can go get, but it becomes very challenging by buying out or making trades, and hat tip to Milwaukee to do that. So I think the most important thing is we were deep in conversations with Miles, and then And then we saw that that he'd accepted an offer with Milwaukee. And again, uh, that's part of this business that is challenging. I can tell you this also, that there are two kind of things that I believe that is kind of fundamental to the league right now, and that is change is inevitable and expect the unexpected. And I can't tell you that, we were fully expected for that.
Kevin Pritchard right there talking about Miles Turner leaving for Milwaukee, found out via the Shams tweet, like a lot, like the rest of us did, which is pretty normal. Players find out that they get traded all the time from reports like that. So I think that's just kind of part of the league. Okay. And I don't want to reiterate the whole, it makes sense that they didn't want to pay the tax, right? That's the first thing that Kevin Pritchard pointed out, right? Herb Simon was prepared to go into the tax to keep Miles Turner, but Milwaukee. And I don't think that the Pacers thought that they were going to have any real competition to pay Miles Turner. I think that what Milwaukee did caught them off guard a little bit. I think it caught everyone off guard. Let's be honest. I don't think anyone had the Milwaukee Bucks will waive Damian Lillard to sign Miles Turner on their NBA offseason, free agency bingo card. I don't think anyone had that written down. And when you read some of the reports, like one of the reports was they only offered Miles Turner $20 million a year. And there's some conflicting reports with that, so who knows what's true and what isn't. But if you don't have any real competition, or if you assume that you don't have any real competition to bring back Miles Turner, then you can afford to offer them a little bit less money. And I think that that's what's currently happening in Chicago. Chicago hasn't re-signed Josh Giddey quite yet, who is a restricted free agent. And the issue is, if you look around the NBA right now, no one has the money to fork out a whole bunch to Josh Giddey. That is not an option right now. And so because of that, I'm sure that the Bulls are probably offering him a little bit lower than what he wants. And they're probably sticking firm to that. And I'm just kind of curious if that's what happened with the Miles Turner negotiation. Because Kevin Pritchard said it right there. He made it sound like they weren't expecting for Milwaukee to do what they did. He didn't expect for them to waive Damian Lillard and to do all those things. And we talked about cap teams and shadow cap teams who are a move away from having cap space. I guess they didn't have Milwaukee listed. And honestly, I don't really blame them, because I don't think anyone thought that the Milwaukee Bucks would do exactly what they just did in waiving Damian Lillard to bring in Miles Turner. Definitely the most shocking thing that we've seen all offseason. And this has led to a trade that happened over the weekend. Jay Huff traded to the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers gave up a 2029 Portland Trailblazers second-round pick and a 2031 second-round pick swap. They sent that to Memphis for 7'1" center going into his fifth year in the NBA, Jay Huff. And I am very intrigued to see how this goes. Jay Huff is about to play on his fourth team in the last 4 years. 3 of those years, he played 20 games or less. That's it. Players or teams tell you what they think about players all the time. And if he's bouncing back and forth between the G League and the NBA, like he was, spending some time playing for the South Bay Lakers and all these things, that is an indication that the teams that had him didn't think he was very good. But clearly the Pacers thought he was, worth a future second-round pick and a second-round pick swap 6 years from now. 2 very low-value assets. He's incredibly cheap. Jay Huff is, right? His cap hit is a little over $2.3 million this year, and then $2.6 million in the 2026-2027 year. And then the following year, his contract has a team option. So the Pacers got cheaper at center, and they didn't give up very much to make it happen, right? He's obviously significantly cheaper than Miles Turner, but he's also not as good as Miles Turner right now. Now, he is 4 years younger. He hasn't been in the league, or he hasn't played a ton in the league. He finally kind of broke through and solidified himself a bit last year, playing 64 games for the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, in a year where Tyrese Halliburton isn't going to play, and you need a center who can come in and be a real guy for you, and like I understand that the Pacers obviously like Isaiah Jackson. With that being said, he's coming off of a torn Achilles, and he's a player whose athleticism is a really important part to his game. Like, does he look the same? Does he move the same? Does he have the same explosiveness above the rim? Don't know. No one knows. And so bringing in a guy like J Huff makes a lot of sense, especially since he found his stride last year after once again playing for 4 different teams in a 4-year span with a pretty decent amount of time spent playing in the G League during those years as well. And the first thing when you look at the J Huff stuff is you'll realize that he shot 40% from 3 last year. The issue, he took less than 1.5 attempts a game. He's at like 1.3 attempts per game. So yes, he's an efficient shooter. Excuse me. 1.3 attempts per game. So yes, he's an efficient shooter. When he's open, he's going to knock him down. But like, that's really not that impressive. Like 40% on like 5 attempts a game. That's pretty good. That's an impressive number. By the way, that's what Miles Turner was at, or 39.6% on about 5.5 attempts from 3 a game was Miles Turner this last year. So there's that. They've got another stretch big, which we know is very important to the Indiana Pacers. They like the spacing. They like kind of having that center roam at the top of the key and all that good stuff. So like they have a guy in J Huff who can do that now, who once again shot a very efficient 40% from 3 on once again 1.3 3-point attempts per game last year. He was also very efficient shooting 2s last year, 72% on 2-point attempts last season on about 1.6 attempts per game. So once again, high efficiency, but not a ton of volume that there's not enough volume that tells you that he's efficient. The numbers look good, but the volume isn't quite there yet to just stamp J Huff as like this uber efficient center who's going to make shots whenever he takes them. And part of that, to be fair to J Huff, is the fact that he only played a little over 11 minutes a game. He's going to play more than 11 minutes a game this next year with the Indiana Pacers because he's not backing up Jaren Jackson Jr. There's a decent chance that he starts. Even if he doesn't start, he's probably going to play like 20-ish minutes a night. And if he can maintain that same efficiency in more minutes, then he will be an excellent Miles Turner replacement on the offensive end. You know, like if, you know, even if the efficiency drops a little bit, like if he's shooting 38% from 3 on like 4 attempts a game, I think that we can live with that. If he's shooting, 65% from 2 on, 4 attempts a game or whatever, I think that we can live with that. Okay, so hopefully that efficiency continues to be high level. Because if it does, then we're going to feel really good about J Huff on the offensive end of the floor. He's averaging about 0.9 blocks per game. And once again, only 11 minutes a night. So that shows some good upside for his ability to protect the rim. But I'm not convinced that he's going to be a great rebounder. He's big. He's a big dude. 7'1", 240 pounds. That just sounds like a guy who's going to go up on the glass and grab rebounds and do all those things. He didn't really do that though when he was in Memphis. He only averaged about 2 rebounds a game. I get it, only playing 11 minutes a night, but there's a per 36 minute stat that people go to sometimes to look at efficiency and what will this guy look like if he played more minutes? What would this guy look like if he played less minutes? All that kind of stuff. So if J Huff were to play 36 minutes a game and rebound at the same rate that he was at only 11 minutes a game, he would only average like 6 rebounds a night. That's actually worse than Miles Turner. So I like the shooting. I like the size. Like I like that he looks like a center, Because there are moments where, Thomas Bryant would run out on the floor to play center. And it was just like, yeah, he looks like a slower power forward just because he looks so much smaller than whatever center he was out there defending. So I like that Jay Huff is a big presence. I like that he's got some shot blocking upside. I like that, if he's open from three, he's probably going to make it. I like that he finishes well around the rim. There's a lot to like about Jay Huff. There is. Like there is a ton to like about this dude. But the rebounding is a little concerning. And that was a major plague or major issue for the Indiana Pacers. It's part of why they lost Game 7, that third quarter, where they gave up 8 offensive rebounds and turned the ball over 7 times. Like that's not an easy thing to overcome. Playing against the Knicks, knowing that every time Mitchell Robinson was on the floor, like it was just going to be a battle for the Pacers to get a rebound. And I don't think that Jay Huff addresses that issue. Now, maybe Isaiah Jackson addresses that issue. Maybe they end up, bringing James Wiseman back, and maybe he is the one who addresses that rebounding issue. But I like Jay Huff. I think that he's a good fit. But with that being said, I don't think he solves the rebounding issue, and that was a major, major issue for the Pacers in the playoffs. I couldn't care less about the regular season. It's about the playoffs for me, and I don't think that Jay Huff solves that playoff rebounding issue that we saw in this last year's run to the NBA Finals. And now, to be fair, it was a run to the NBA Finals, so maybe the rebounding isn't as important as I'm making it out to be. Now, it's hard for me not to like any move that the Indiana Pacers make because they've made a lot of really good ones over the past few years. Kevin Pritchard has this voodoo magic going on the past couple years, and I'm going to tell you what that voodoo magic is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
minutes in today's sports world. It's here. The real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the real Jonathan Smith Show here on a beautiful Tuesday. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. You want to head over there, subscribe to be part of the conversation. Maybe you're watching on X __ Jonathan Smith to follow the show there. You can also listen on that Indy Sports Ticket app. I believe it was Ridger. So Ross, it was Ross. Ross, thank you for asking me about my trip to Chicago. It was good. My wife and I, we just, I was given tickets to go see the Cubs play. I'm a huge Cubs fan. They won the series. Had a blast. We got in Friday night and we went to dinner somewhere that was really good. I forget where. It was a long trip. It was a long trip. We went to dinner somewhere Friday night. That's what we did. We went down to Navy Pier. Spent the 4th just kind of walking around, seeing all the shops. It was just a really cool kind of place to be. Walked quite a bit down there. Saturday was a rough day. My wife really wanted to go to the Nutella Cafe. So we got there later than what we wanted to because driving in Chicago is terrible. If you want to find an idiot quickly, just get in a car and drive like 2 minutes and they'll just find you. You'll find way more than one. So yeah, we ended up getting to the Nutella Cafe late, had to leave, ended up walking 45 minutes to the planetarium. My wife is a science teacher. She loves space. So we walked 45 minutes to get there because we just didn't want to drive anymore. And that was actually really cool because they had the Chicago NASCAR street race going on and they were testing all the cars on that Saturday. And so you just walk through and they're like driving over bridges and we were underneath them and just hearing how loud and crisp all of the engine sounded was a really cool experience. So did that. The planetarium was cool. And then what else did we do? And then Sunday, we went to the Nutella Cafe, which was cool. Really good. If you like sugar, you should just go there. Did that. Walked the Miracle Mile, I think is what it's called. And then we went to Wrigley. Just the most magical place on earth. Like you just walk in, and if you're a baseball fan in any way, shape, or form, like it just gives you goosebumps immediately because you understand the amount of history going on in that building or in that stadium. And it was just incredible. I love that place. Hadn't been since I was like 11. And I love it so much. So thank you, Ross, for asking. I had a very, very good trip and I'm glad to be back to talk about this Huff trade. And the trade went through and I know who Huff is because I am just a league pass nerd and I like watching hoops. And so they make this trade for Huff. I'm like, immediately, as I'm walking around, I'm like, yeah, like this makes a lot of sense. A guy who can kind of stretch the floor, good screener, finishes well around the rim, not a very good rebounder, but that's fine. All that kind of stuff. And I started thinking through the history of some of the Kevin Pritchard trades. He traded for Tyrese Halliburton, right? Had to give up a little bit to make that trade happen. Had to give up Domantas Sabonis. And they bring over Tyrese Halliburton, and he's now a superstar. Kevin Pritchard gave up nothing, next to nothing, for Obi Toppin. And Obi Toppin, while not like a star in any, like he'll never be an all-star or anything like that. But he's now an important piece for the Indiana Pacers. Obi Toppin is. He made a trade for Aaron Nesmith. Gave up Malcolm Brogdon. Didn't give up much of anything to bring over Aaron Nesmith, who is now an important piece for the Pacers. And when he's up for an extension, he is going to get paid. He's going to because he's a two-way guy. If he dribbles the ball twice, you're fine with that. He can obviously make a three and all those things. And I was like, Huff. Like, does that kind of fall into this same category? And the answer is no, not really. All three of those players, Tyrese Halliburton, Aaron Nesmith, Obi Toppin, all three of those guys were lottery picks. Like coming out of college, teams looked at them and said, this guy's got a lot to his game. You know, like they looked at Tyrese Halliburton and they said, like, this guy is good enough to be our starting point guard or one of our starting guards because the Kings took him and he played off the ball quite a bit. The Celtics looked at Aaron Nesmith and were like, we like his athleticism. He wasn't a great shooter coming out of Vanderbilt, but he was like a high profile guy, all that kind of stuff. And they looked at Aaron Nesmith and they're like, this guy, at a minimum, can be a rotation player for us on a really good basketball team. And the Knicks looked at Obi Toppin and they're like, oh, the athleticism and the size. This guy can be a rotation player on a great team. And Tyrese Halliburton was good in Sacramento, but clearly didn't live up to what they wanted. They preferred to have De'Aaron Fox over him. And then the Knicks, like didn't play Obi Toppin much. They gave him up for next to nothing. The Celtics were obviously fine with giving up Aaron Nesmith. All three of those guys didn't live up to whatever the expectation was of the original franchise that drafted him. But they were lottery picks. And so you knew that there was talent there. It just needed to be pulled out of them a little bit. And then you bring them over and, they're playing for a great head coach and Rick Carlisle, who has developed a system that they all fit very well into. Jay Huff is not the same thing. This guy was undrafted, and it's not like he was an undrafted guy who was like the third ranked player in his high school class and he's just oozing with talent. Still a really good player. Was the number 60. He was the 61st ranked player in his high school class. Played at Virginia for 4 years. All that kind of stuff. But the guy was undrafted for a reason. Like the pedigree isn't the same. The talent level isn't the same. But he's probably going to work out. He's probably going to come over here and at a minimum be like a solid center option, better than Tony Bradley or Thomas Bryant was this last year. Okay, I expect for him to meet that expectation of at a minimum just like solid backup center. Because the Pacers have an identity. And it's so interesting. Like you look across the NBA and there's just a major lack of teams with I look at their team or their roster or whatever, and I'm like, that team has a legitimate identity that I can point at. Like for the Pacers, you look at their team and their roster and how they play, and you say, hey, like this team wants to get up and down, pace and space. People love saying that. The Pacers fit it. They play together as a team and they move the ball well. Like there is a clear stylistic choice in the way that the Indiana Pacers play basketball. A lot of teams in the NBA don't have that. The Cavaliers do. They are offensive oriented, right? They're going to play big. That way, it makes it really tough for you to score at the rim, right? Like that is who Cleveland is. Boston. They love that. They trust their talent, I think, more than any other team in the NBA. It's a lot of one-on-one. We're going to match up punt, and if you help, you just gave up a three. Congratulations. And then defensively, they're big, long, and athletic, and they guard really well. Okay, the Knicks, offensive-oriented with good defensive wings. That is their team. And then, you get a little further down the list. You look at the Bucks. It's like you have Giannis, and that is the end of their identity. Okay, you look at a team like the Bulls. What is their identity? They don't really have one. And then you look at the really bad teams like Toronto. Toronto's identity is we're going to get a bunch of players that are just good enough to get paid, and we're going to put them all together. That's what Toronto does. Brooklyn doesn't really have much of an identity. I think Philly's forming one with these three young backcourt players between McCain and Maxey, and now VJ Edgecombe, who went for 28 the other night in a summer league game. Charlotte doesn't really have an identity. I think Washington is working towards one. Those are all the teams out east, right? And then you get to the West, and it's like, what's the Utah Jazz? What is their identity? They don't really have one. The Pelicans don't really seem to have one. Food, actually. That is the New Orleans Pelicans identity. It's just food. Like, they're going to eat a lot in that organization. Congratulations to them. The Kings, they don't really have much of an identity either. And it's not a coincidence that the worst teams in the NBA lack an identity, because when you don't have one, you don't know who to draft, you don't know who to sign in free agency, who to trade for, or anything like that. And then you compare it to the Pacers. They know exactly what they're looking for at all times. It's like going to the grocery store. When Amelia and I first got married, look, I was single, out of college for a few years, and would just like go to the grocery store and grab whatever. And I spent way too much time at the grocery store. I would come home and like have no set plan of like what I wanted to eat. And so I'm just kind of throwing stuff together, and like that's fine for like a little bit. But then I got married, and Amelia's like, Jonathan, we're going to schedule out what we're going to eat every single week. That way we know what to get at the grocery store. And guess what? My time at the grocery store I wasn't there nearly as long as I was before I got married. And all of a sudden, I started eating like real food, and I got healthier. And there's just something to be said about having a plan. And when you walk into free agency or the grocery store or whatever, life is a million times easier when you know exactly what you're looking for. And the Pacers always know exactly what they're looking for because they have a real, legitimate identity. And they think, Kevin Pritchard and the rest of his staff, they think that J. Huff is a fit. And because of, first and foremost, just their recent success in making these trades, he's probably going to work out. He probably is, because they think that he fits what they're looking for. Now, is he enough of a fit to be like a starting center or like a real contributor on an NBA Finals team? I don't know. We're going to find out. But I just really appreciate how this Pacers organization has a real plan and a real legitimate thing that they're looking for. When you look at other teams like the Kings, they're like, who's the best player available? I guess we'll just take them no matter how expensive they are. Or you're the Pelicans, and you're like, hey, let's trade up 10 spots and let's give up our first round pick next year, even though we're probably going to be bad to do it. Like, they're just doing things to do them. Not the Pacers. You can tell they have a real, legitimate plan, and that is so incredibly important if you want to build a winner in the NBA, in the NFL, or any other league. Speaking of other leagues, the NFL, I like listening to podcasts and other radio shows and those different types of things. And the NFL is very quickly approaching, right? Like it's going to be here before we know it. We've got training camp starting up here at the end of the month, and I can't wait. And I've heard a lot of conversation around the Commanders and the Broncos, two teams that overachieved last year. Hopefully you bet they're over with me. And the Commanders end up going on a run to the NFC Championship game, and the Broncos end up making the playoffs, and everyone loves them. And I think people love them a little bit too much. I think there's a team with a second-year quarterback that is going to be better than the Commanders and the Broncos. I'll tell you who that is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
weeknights at noon. The Real Jonathan Smith Show. Now, this is Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy's Sports Ticket. Head over there and subscribe. Maybe watch it on X, __ Jonathan Smith to follow me there and watch the show there. You can also listen on that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. Now, NFL season, it's coming up, doing the work on it, starting to do the work on it, because these rosters are big. And there's a lot of teams, 32, 53 guys on the roster, guys in training camp, just a lot going on. And, as I read different articles and, do all that kind of stuff, people love the Commanders. And I get it. Jaden Daniels, big year one, right? Throwing for 1 million yards, taking the, Washington Commanders to the NFC Championship game, 12-5 record. Completed 69% of his passes, threw for 3,500 yards, 25 touchdowns, only 9 interceptions. Jaden Daniels. Should he have been the number 1 overall pick? The answer is no. But yeah, he had a big year last year. And everyone is all about him and the Commanders and, just everything about him. Cliff Kingsbury, he should be a head coach again. I don't know about that. But people like the Commanders, and I get it. Like, they are going to be a good football team because they have solved the quarterback issue that they've had for forever. Bo Nix, the Broncos. People love the Broncos right now as well. They went 10-7 last year in a tough AFC West division. Bo Nix completed about 66% of his passes, 29 touchdowns, only 12 interceptions, threw for 3,700 yards. So people love the Commanders because they were really good last year. And I get it. I like the Commanders. Okay? Deep run last year, bringing in Deebo Samuel, had a pretty solid defense. I get it. People like the Commanders. Bo Nix, paired with Sean Payton, year 2, probably going to get a little bit better. Brought in a little bit more defensive talent. Like, that defense is going to be nasty. Bringing in Dre Greenlaw, got the reigning, defensive player of the year, and Patrick Surtain. It's a good team. Made the playoffs last year, lost in the first round, but they had to go to Buffalo. Play Josh Allen, the MVP. People love both of those teams. I think those are the two hottest teams with second-year quarterbacks that everyone's kind of jumping on the bandwagon of going into year 2. And then you have the Bears. And I think I like the Bears more than the Commanders and the Broncos. I reserve the right to change this opinion if any injuries happen during training camp. I like the Bears a lot. If Ben Johnson is half as good as everyone expects him to be, then he'll be a good head coach. This is a guy who took Jared Goff. The Lions were like, we're good. We don't want Jared Goff anymore. We're tired of Sean McVay having to baby him through everything. I don't know if you know this or not, but you know how those NFL quarterbacks, they have, the headset inside of their helmet that allows them to talk to and hear, whoever is calling the plays. So what would happen when Jared Goff was playing for the Rams is, he would walk to the line of scrimmage, and then, the communication device shuts off with like 15 seconds left. And so they would go to the line quickly when Jared Goff was in LA, and Sean McVay would tell him what to do. Like, they get to the line with like 22 seconds left on the play clock, and Sean McVay would pop in and be like, hey, the defense is in this coverage. If this guy, like this guy should be open. If he's not, then this guy's open. And then Jared Goff would snap the football, and he would make the right read because Sean McVay told him exactly what to do. And then they make it to the Super Bowl. They play the Patriots. The Patriots are smart enough to figure out what's going on. All of a sudden, they're not showing their defense, so there's like 10 seconds left on the play clock. And then, you have that 3-point output from Jared Goff and that Rams offense that year. And then Jared Goff, then that offseason gets traded to Detroit. where Ben Johnson takes him in and just teaches the guy how to actually play quarterback. And I get it, as a head coach, like, your responsibilities are greater. You're usually not as hands-on, but I promise you that he's finding a way to help Caleb Williams figure it out. And Caleb Williams has more talent than Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. He does. And we saw a little bit of it last year. We didn't get to see all of it because the Bears weren't very good. 5-12 on the year. They got off to that 4-1 start, and then things just kind of slowly went downhill from there. But the issue for the Bears last year was the offensive line. Caleb Williams was sacked a league-high 68 times, and that's not just the offensive line. That is obviously the quarterback as well. Are you holding on to the football for too long? But it's also the offensive line. It's both, right? And so Caleb Williams sacked a league-high 68 times last year. That should be better because the Bears went out, and they brought in Joe Thuney, right, former offensive guard of the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the better offensive guards in the NFL for the last few years. They also go out and they signed Jonah Jackson, who's going to play the other offensive guard position. He posted a career-high 95% pass block win rate on 114 pass blocking snaps last year, but it didn't get to play a ton because of a shoulder injury. Okay, they also drafted an offensive tackle, Ozzie Trapilo, in the second round out of Boston College. We'll see if he's an upgrade over what they had. Either way, the interior of the offensive line improved. They should run the ball a little bit better. That's usually what having good offensive guards allows you to do. The head coach got better because no one can be worse than Matt Eberflus. They add Colston Loveland with the 10th pick. DJ Moore's back. Roma Dunze is going into year 2. Once again, Colston Loveland, who the Bears liked more than Tyler Warren. Okay, so they've improved a lot of the positions around Caleb Williams. Okay, and most players, not all, but most players get better from year 1 to year 2. And the thing with Caleb Williams is, like, when he threw the football, he wasn't that bad. Completed about 62.5% of his passes. That could be a little bit better. Okay, he threw for 3,500 yards, 20 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions. Like, that is not a bad rookie year at all. It just looks bad because Jaden Daniels was great and Bo Nix was really good as well. So the Bears are going to be better this year to a point where, like, I think that they're going to make the playoffs. I feel really hesitant to say that, but, like, I don't think that the Vikings are going to be as good. What are the Lions going to look like after both of their coordinators were taken away? Really like Coach Campbell up there in Detroit, but, he leaned on his coordinators quite a bit. What are they going to look like with 2 new coordinators? So the NFC shifting around a little bit. Wouldn't be surprised to see the Bears kind of slide into one of those playoff spots. I think that they're going to be pretty good this year because they're going to get a year 2 leap or a year 2 improvement. Let's not call it a leap. A year 2 improvement from Caleb Williams, and they upgraded at head coach. Now, speaking of year 2 jumps, A.D. Mitchell, or Leatu Latu, was the 15th pick last year. A.D. Mitchell taken in the second round, and then Matt Gonsalves, the offensive lineman, was taken in the third round by the Indianapolis Colts last year. And usually, year 1 to year 2 is when you see a lot of players make their big improvement. It's not always the case. It's not. But usually, year 1 to year 2. Of these 3 players, Leatu Latu should be the best. Was the 15th pick in the NFL draft. Highly touted guy. People talked about how NFL ready he was, and he was so NFL ready that he only played about 54%, or he only played 54% of the Colts' defensive snaps last year. That's not really, really great, but hey, it's whatever. And he only had 4 sacks on the year and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, it was a very underwhelming year from the 15th overall pick. But then you go to, like, some of the other stats, and he, like, led the Colts in hurries. He led the Colts in quarterback knockdowns. And once again, he didn't play as many snaps as some of these other guys. And so there's a little bit of hope there of like, all right, like year 1 to year 2, he gets a little bit better. And those, 4 of those quarterback knockdowns turn into sacks because he gets there just, half a second quicker because, he's stronger and he's had a year to kind of figure out how to beat these NFL offensive tackles and all those things. Okay. So maybe he has a jump. I think he will. I definitely think he'll be better. Is he going to be like a 13 sack guy? I don't know. Probably not. But could he be like a 9 sack guy and make a couple big plays for the Colts? Maybe. We'll see. And then you've got A.D. Mitchell, who I don't really have much hope for after last year. But he's young. Maybe he grew up. Maybe he has reached a point where, whenever he's going to get hit running across the middle, he realizes, you know what? Like, let's just get hit and catch the football as opposed to just get hit. He didn't play much last year. Only had 23 receptions for 312 yards. It's not great. Was only targeted 55 times. He appeared in all 17 of the Colts games. He only had a 41% catch percentage. Not good. So, he obviously threw the interception to, the Broncos in a really big spot last year. Let's just not put him in that position this next year. All right, Shane. But if he grew up, if he matured a little bit, then, maybe he has a better year 2. The offense is going to look a little bit different if Daniel Jones winds up being the starter. Maybe that suits A.D. Mitchell's skill set a little bit more. Daniel Jones isn't going to drop back and air it out down the field like an Anthony Richardson will. So maybe, guys who run good routes and can kind of get open underneath. Maybe those are the guys who mesh well with Daniel Jones. And if that's the case, then A.D. Mitchell seems to make a lot of sense. People love to throw out, how he led the NFL in separation at the top routes and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's cool. I would just like to see it translate to receptions and receiving yards and touchdowns and all those, much more important things. So I don't have much hope for him, but like I said, maybe he grew up. Maybe he's reached a point where he can be a legitimately helpful player. And then there's Matt Gonsalves, who needs to have the biggest jump from his rookie year to his second year. He's probably going to replace Will Fries and be the starting right guard for the Colts offensive line. A Colts offensive line that wasn't good last year. They were top 10, or I guess bottom 10, in hurries allowed. It's not good. Not good when your quarterback, especially when they're not very good, is consistently hurried, like Anthony Richardson and Joe Flacco were last year. They were 10th in quarterback hits allowed. Not a genius, but I'm pretty sure it's important to, keep your quarterback clean. That's what they tell me, at least. I don't know. Chris Ballard, way, way smarter than I am at this kind of stuff because he's the offensive line guru. He's all about the trenches. So, anyway, they were 10th in quarterback hits allowed last year, and they were 7th in pressures allowed. That's not a good year from your offensive line. Quentin Nelson, rock solid. I understand that they had injuries and, Braden Smith, left for personal reasons. And, people seem to like Bernard Raymond and he's going to get a contract here at some point to be the Colts starting left tackle. That's cool. But you need these guys to stay healthy. And more importantly, you've got to keep Daniel Jones / Anthony Richardson, whoever ends up playing quarterback for the Colts this year. You have to keep them clean. This was not a good offensive line last year. And they had 2 offensive linemen leaving free agency, one of them being Will Fries, who you could argue was the Colts' best offensive lineman last year. It was probably Quentin Nelson, but if you wanted to tell me that it was Will Fries, I'd be like, all right, yeah, that makes sense. So if the Colts need a leap out of any of their, NFL players going from year 1, their rookie year, to year 2, it needs to be Matt Gonsalves. Because they moved him around a little bit, had him play some different positions. He kind of struggled to tackle. He was okay at right guard when he needed to play there. But hopefully, Matt Gonsalves has a year 2 leap because I'm just not convinced that this offensive line that wasn't very good last year is going to be much better this next season. And it's important. Like that has to be fixed no matter who's playing quarterback for the Colts, because when you have a bad quarterback, and whether it's Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson, make no mistake about it, they're going to be bad. Then your offensive line has to be better to elevate your quarterback. And right now, I don't think that the Colts have an offensive line good enough to do that. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, speaking of quarterbacks, quarterback came out on Netflix today. Something very important in the history of sports happened 15 years ago today. I'll tell you what it is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
W. Let's do this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. Head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on X__ Jonathan Smith. If you want to follow the show there, you can also listen on that Indy Sports Ticket app. No matter how you're listening, it is greatly appreciated. Quarterback on Netflix came out today, where they follow those 3 different quarterbacks around every single year. I know one of them was Joe Burrow. There's a clip from that already going super viral, which is cool. They followed around Jared Goff and they followed around Kirk Cousins. Should be interesting. Joe Burrow obviously not having the year he wanted. The Lions being really good. Kirk Cousins getting benched for Michael Penix. Still in Atlanta, by the way, which is kind of weird. But in addition to that, today is the 15-year anniversary of LeBron James doing The Decision on ESPN. Happened 15 years ago. Today, gave birth to my 10-year-old self's, favorite jokes ever. He loses in the finals, and everyone's like, LeBron should go play hockey because it's only 3 periods, or LeBron has to drive an automatic because he can't handle the clutch. It's great. Great jokes. So those 2 things going on right now. Something else going on, though, is the Indiana Pacers in their offseason summer league. They play on Friday, I think. Thursday night is their first summer league game. You're going to get to look at Cam Jones and whoever else the Pacers have on their summer league roster. But really, we're going to be paying attention to Cam Jones, trying to answer this question of, can he help us right now? Can he help us right now? Can he come in? Can he play alongside of, can he play alongside Andrew Nimhard? When Tyrese Halliburton comes back, is this a guy who's going to be able to really be able to play? And here is the Pacers and their roster for this next season. Stephen Ashworth, guard out of Creighton. I believe he went undrafted. Robert Baker, forward/center out of Harvard. Another guy who's going to be a rookie. Buddy Boeheim. Let's go, buddy. Come on now. Let's see how that goes. Ray J. Dennis. He kind of played for the Pacers last year, was on a 2-way. He's going to play. RJ Felton out of East Carolina. Enrique Freeman, who the Pacers took last year, 6'7" forward out of Akron, freakishly long arms, a guy who wasn't going to play college basketball at all, and then he walks on an Akron, and then the next thing you know, he wins like MAC Player of the Year. Okay, so Enrique Freeman, he's on the team. Johnny Furphy, Pacers' second-round pick from last year. You saw him play a little bit in some of these games throughout the regular season. He's on the roster. Quentin Jackson, another 2-way contract guy. He's back on the roster as well. Josiah Jordan-James played for the G League last year. Now no longer the Fort Wayne Mad Ants. They're now the Noblesville Boom. But Josiah Jordan-James, if you're a college basketball fan, you probably remember him playing at Tennessee. Big, long, athletic forward. We'll see if things work out for him. Samson Johnson, guy who played at UConn last year. Hunter Maladano, played at Wyoming. Taylon Peter, the second-round pick this year that everyone was like, who? We'll see how that goes. Very intrigued to kind of see what he looks like, coming out of Liberty. Look, can he shoot the ball and can he play defense? If he can do both of those things, then everyone will like you. Really that simple. Tamanaga out of, the Asian Steph Curry who played at Nebraska. He's on the roster, played for the Noblesville Boom last year. And then Philip Wheeler, no idea who this guy is. Most recently played for a team in Puerto Rico. So that is the Pacers roster. Didn't see Cam Jones on here. That is because the trade probably hasn't been finalized with what are they called? With the San Antonio Spurs. The way all that stuff works is really weird. Even though that should have been finalized by now, but I'm sure that we will see him as well. Okay. So yeah, that is the Pacers Summer League roster. Very intrigued to see what Johnny Furphy looks like, because this is a guy whose role is probably going to increase a little bit this next season with Tyrese Halliburton being out. Quentin Jackson probably going to spend a little bit more time with the Pacers this next year than he did last year with Tyrese Halliburton being out. So those two guys. And then there's just players that I just generally like. Like I like Enrique Freeman. I liked what he did at Akron. I think he's, a good rebounder. I think he can defend a little bit. Is the offensive game there though? I don't know. We're going to find out. I'm sure he's been working on it for the last year after not playing much for the Indiana Pacers. I liked Josiah Jordan-James coming out of Tennessee. It's like there's just certain guys at certain programs that like when they come out, like you like them. And guys that play at Tennessee work really hard and they defend. And Josiah Jordan-James does that. He did that at Tennessee. Obviously, he did that well enough with the Noblesville Boom last year to, earn a summer league spot. So, and obviously, who doesn't love Tamanaga? Can he guard? Not really. But can he hit threes and be wildly entertaining? He absolutely can. So there are some interesting pieces on this year's Indiana Pacers Summer League team. And we'll see how it goes. Obviously, Cam Jones should play as well. Not too sure why he's not on the roster right there. But someone who will not play this next year is Tyrese Halliburton. Kevin Pritchard confirmed during a little short press conference yesterday that Tyrese Halliburton isn't going to play this next year. While he was talking about that, he mentioned how the Achilles tear happened a little higher up on the Achilles where there's more blood flow to it. That's important because per my 2 minutes of Google research, I guess if it's in an area, the Achilles tear is a little higher up and it's in an area with more blood flow, then that can help reduce the rehab time by like a month or so. Okay. So it doesn't really matter. He's not playing this year one way or the other, but I'm sure for him, having to do a month less of rehab and being able to get out onto the court a month sooner than he originally thought, like that's a pretty nice thing. So thank you, Kevin Pritchard, for the update on Tyrese Halliburton. He was also asked about Miles Turner leaving, and he gave a pretty decently long answer explaining why Miles Turner left, and also made a comment about the ownership group and their willingness to go into the tax before the offseason started. Here's Kevin Pritchard talking about Miles Turner leaving for Milwaukee. Let's try that again. Here is Kevin Pritchard talking about Miles Turner leaving for Milwaukee.
I don't want to get into the specifics of Miles because the truth is he gave 10 great years here. I loved having him be here. I hope I'm friends with him for a long time. I know this, that Herb Simon and Stephen Rails and the Simon family were fully prepared to go deep into the tax to keep him. And we really wanted to do that. And we were negotiating in good faith. But what happens in this league is sometimes you're negotiating, but because a guy is unrestricted, he has the right to say, that's the offer I want. I'm going to take it, and that's best for my family. And again, we were in good faith negotiations. It was a little surprising that, how Milwaukee created that. I don't know if, we always say in our conference room, there's cap teams that have cap space, and there's shadow teams that have cap space. You can go get, but it becomes very challenging by buying out or making trades, and hat tip to Milwaukee to do that. So I think the most important thing is we were deep in conversations with Miles, and then we saw that he'd accepted an offer with Milwaukee, and again, that's part of this business that is challenging. I can tell you this also, that there are two kind of things that I believe that is kind of fundamental to the league right now, and that is change is inevitable and expect the unexpected. And I can't tell you that we were fully expected for that.
Kevin Pritchard, Pacers president of basketball operations, talking there about Miles Turner and his departure to the Milwaukee Bucks. And someone in the YouTube chat said it. I think it was Ridger. It was Ridger. Seems like the Pacers were surprised by Milwaukee is the comment from Ridger. And that's exactly what it feels like coming out of that interview. Okay, first and foremost, Kevin Pritchard did the most important thing. He protected ownership, immediately said, hey, we were prepared to go into the tax. The conversations we were having with Miles Turner was going to put us into the tax, and Herb Simon and the rest of the ownership group, they were more than willing to pay it. All right, and that's a good thing. I do think that this ownership group wants to win. I do think that they were willing to pay the tax. With that being said, until Tyrese Halliburton got hurt. As soon as he gets hurt, everything changes. Because, why would you want to pay the luxury tax in a year where you're not going to have a chance to win the whole thing? You're not. And in 2 years, Miles Turner is going to be 31 as opposed to being 29 and all that kind of stuff. I understand it. I do. And so it makes sense that they didn't want to pay the tax. Okay? So this is what I think happened. This is an assumption. There's a report out there from Jake Fisher who does a really good job covering the league. Okay? He's a guy who is reliable. When he reports things, they tend to be true. He reported that the Indiana Pacers only offered Miles Turner a 3-year, $60 million deal. And I think that it's because they didn't think anyone was going to be real competition to pay Miles Turner. The only other option was Brooklyn. It's Miles, do you really want to go? You really want to go play for the Brooklyn Nets? Do you really want to go win 17 games because they're going to pay you $5 million more than we are? It's if you want to do that, then go right ahead. But we don't think that you're willing to go to Brooklyn. That, based off of bird's eye view, pre-Damian Lillard getting waived, seemed to be the only other team that could sign Miles Turner, and they have Nick Claxton. They didn't need another center. And so I'm sure that in those negotiations, the Pacers offered him a little less than probably what Miles Turner wanted, which is pretty normal. And I'm sure that they felt pretty good about it because they looked around and it's who else is the competition to sign Miles Turner? And their answer was nobody. And then the Milwaukee Bucks did what they did, which surprised everyone. And all of a sudden, he's going to Milwaukee. It was incredible. It was a very bizarre thing that happened. So I think that what Milwaukee did very simply caught the Pacers off guard. I think that they wanted to bring Miles Turner back, obviously for less than what Miles Turner wanted. That's pretty normal in negotiations, though. The employer always wants to pay the said employee less than what the said employee wants. It's just kind of how it is. And, Miles Turner, this is also reported. I missed who reported this. Apparently, Miles Turner didn't give the Pacers a chance to counter. Just kind of based off of what Kevin Pritchard said there. That's what it sounds like. I mean, he found out, like we all did. He found out from the Shams tweet. Miles Turner didn't call them, say, hey, Milwaukee wants to pay me this much. Can you match? If you match, I'll come back. That doesn't seem to have been an option made available to them. So it seems like they were caught a little bit off guard by what the Milwaukee Bucks did. And to be fair to them, I think everyone was caught off guard by what the Milwaukee Bucks did. But once again, makes sense. There's no need to pay the tax in a year where you're not going to have a chance to win a title. Okay, we've watched the Boston Celtics completely tear down their roster. No more Porzingis, no more Drew Holiday. By the way, still kind of waiting on him to get traded because he apparently doesn't want to play for Brooklyn, which I don't blame him. I wouldn't want to play for Brooklyn either. So, tough thing, but hopefully that is the end of all the Miles Turner controversy until Miles Turner makes his return to, Gamebridge next year. He 1,000% deserves a tribute video. I'm not a big fan of those, but when you play somewhere for a year, you play somewhere for a full decade, right? And you're an important piece to a team that went to the NBA Finals, then you deserve a tribute video. That's how I feel about it. And we'll see whether or not he gets one. I think that the Pacers posted something for him the other day, but that's very different than doing it in the actual arena. So we'll see. But when we come back here in about 4 minutes, there had been a lot of discussion about who was going to replace Miles Turner, right? Who were they going to bring in to play some of those center minutes? Because Tony Bradley minutes are not the most inspiring thing in the world, and Isaiah Jackson is a very good player. But do you really want Isaiah Jackson playing like 30 minutes a night? I don't think so. And the Pacers didn't think so either. So they went out, they traded for a new center, Jay Huff. I've got a lot of thoughts on Jay Huff. And I'm going to tell you what they are when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
Uh-oh. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket. If you want to head over there and subscribe, maybe watching on X__ Jonathan Smith. Maybe you're listening on that Indy Sports Ticket app. No matter how you're tuning in, it is always greatly appreciated. Okay, once again, if you want to be part of the conversation, you can head over to YouTube. You can watch on Indy's Sports Ticket app. I'm on X right now. I saw a tweet that was kind of interesting, but I'll talk about it later. Jay Huff traded to the Indiana Pacers. Pacers gave up a 2029 Trailblazers second-round pick and a 2031 second-round pick swap to the Memphis Grizzlies in exchange for the center who played 4 years at Virginia and has played on 4 teams. In the last 4 years, 3 of those years, he played 20 games or less. What does that mean? It means those 3 years, he was not consistently an NBA player, right? Spent some time in the G League, spent some time with the South Bay Lakers, and did things of that nature. Okay, so not like a super elite guy, right? Which you can tell based off of what the Indiana Pacers gave up to bring him here to Indianapolis, right? The guy's also incredibly cheap. Okay, he's on a 4-year deal. You know, he played for Memphis this last year, finally stuck, played 64 games, right? So the guy's gotten better, right? He's worked on his craft and he's become an NBA player, it seems. But he's incredibly cheap. The cap hit is a little over $2.3 million this year. $2.6 million in the 2026-2027 season. And then the following year, he's got a team option. He is significantly cheaper than Miles Turner, allowing this Indiana Pacers team to stay under the tax. With that being said, he's not as good as Miles Turner. We can start there. But he is 4 years younger, and he's gotten better over, the last 4 years, which, maybe he reaches a point where he's as good as Miles Turner. Right, but this is a good year to take a flyer on a player who's shown a little bit of upside, and he has, right? Like the 64 games he played in for the Memphis Grizzlies this year were good. The plan is to have Parker Fleming, who covers the Grizzlies, on later on in the week to talk a little more specifically about Jay Huff and what he did for them. But, like I said, he showed some good things, and this is a good year, a year where your best player isn't going to play all year, and your starting center just went to Milwaukee. This is a good year to take a flyer on a guy who's shown some upside. Okay? I get it. He's played on 4 teams in the last 4 years. That is not the most endearing fact, but he found his stride last year, shot 40% from 3, didn't take that many, only, took 1.5 attempts per game. That's not great. But, the 40% number is really nice. His 2-point shooting percentage, pretty similar, shot 72% on 2s last year. But then again, only took like 1.5 two-point shot attempts per game. So the efficiency is good. Okay? Look, I'd rather the Pacers trade for a guy who shot 40% on 1.3 attempts per game than a guy who shot 20% on, 7 attempts per game, right? So the efficiency is good. But the volume isn't there. Like the shot attempt volume isn't there to be like, this guy is a certified good shooter. You compare it to a guy like Miles Turner, who shot, 39.5% last year, I believe, on about 5.5 attempts per game. Like that is enough volume to be able to look at Miles Turner and be like, yeah, that guy shot the ball well last year. Okay, let me pull up his real numbers here. Yeah. 39.6% from 3 on 5.5 attempts per game. Like that is a legitimate, you can point at that guy and say, that guy's a good shooter. 40% on, less than 1.5 attempts per game, not good enough to be like, yeah, that guy's definitely a good shooter. So, like I said, the efficiency is good. Volume's not there. Part of that's because he didn't play a ton. Only played about 11 minutes a night when he was playing for the Grizzlies this last season. Okay, he should get more minutes than that with the Indiana Pacers this year, just because Jaren Jackson Jr. isn't playing for the Pacers. He's not sitting behind a guy who competes to be defensive player of the year every year and is obviously a really important part of the Grizzlies offense. So he's going to get to play a little bit more because he's competing with Isaiah Jackson and Tony Bradley right now for playing time. So with that comes a little more volume in terms of the shooting, especially with the way that the Pacers like to play. Like Jay Huff is going to have the basketball in his hands from time to time because everyone has the basketball in their hands when you're a part of this Indiana Pacers offense. And I think we'll see even more ball movement because you don't have a bail you out guy in Tyrese Halliburton who can just go and kind of make things happen for everyone out there on the floor. They don't have as much of that this year. So Jay Huff, congratulations. You're going to touch the ball a lot. And if he can maintain the same level of efficiency with an increase in the number of shots, like if he stays at 40% on 5 attempts a game, then he's going to be an excellent replacement for Miles Turner on the offensive end of the floor. Defensively, he's got some rim protection upside, right? Averaged 0.9 blocks per game, but once again, only played 11 minutes a night, right? So there's a little bit of upside there in terms of his ability to protect the rim. He's a big dude. Like the dude's 7'1", 240 pounds. If he's just in the right spot, then, chances are he's going to have a positive impact on the defensive end of the floor, right? And I understand that, people don't like that Miles Turner missed some open looks in the finals, but the defensive work that he was good defensively in that series, did a really good job of keeping a good Chet Holmgren in check throughout the whole series. So that's kind of my question. How does he handle defensively? Like how does he kind of fit in on that side of the ball? Because I think offensively he's going to be fine. There's a legitimate concern about the rebounding. He's got, the size to be like a dominant rebounder. Once again, 7'1", 240 pounds. Love that. But I'm not convinced that he's going to be some great rebounder. Only averaged 2 rebounds per game and 11 minutes of play on average. That's just not very good. Like that's bad. It's not impressive in any way, shape, or form. If you look at the per 36 minutes, which is basically like what would your averages be if you played 36 minutes? He would only average he would only average 6 rebounds a game. If Charlie Huff were to play 36 minutes a night, he would have averaged 6 rebounds a game last year for the Memphis Grizzlies. That's actually worse than Miles Turner. Okay, so the rebounding, not really convinced that it's going to be super great. But with that being said, I mean, you can't do much worse than what Miles Turner did on the glass. So we'll see kind of how it translates. It seems like he's got the skill set that the Pacers are looking for, and that's really where it all starts. And I've seen, or I've been thinking as I was in Chicago and this trade went through. And I was just thinking about the history with Kevin Pritchard and these trades. He trades for Tyrese Halliburton, and he's now a superstar, right? I had to give up a little bit to make that happen. I had to give up Sabonis and things like that. But, ultimately the Kings were like, we don't want this guy anymore. We would rather have De'Aaron Fox, who's now playing for the Spurs. Okay, but to Kevin Pritchard's credit, Tyrese Halliburton is now a legitimate superstar who led his team to the NBA Finals. Kevin Pritchard traded nothing for Obi Toppin, and Obi Toppin has become a very important part of this Indiana Pacers team. Is he, going to be an all-star ever? Probably not. But is he going to come off the bench and hit threes and run the floor and rebound a little bit? Yes. Right? He was an important piece for that Pacers team. Kevin Pritchard also gave up Malcolm Brogdon for Aaron Nesmith, another very important piece for the Indiana Pacers. And so this trade happened. And I was like, is Kevin Pritchard going to do this again? Are they going to make another deal? Or they take this undervalued asset like he's bit like, Billy Bean did if you watch Moneyball. Is he just going to take another undervalued guy and he's going to come over here and all of a sudden he's going to be really good? And I was thinking about it. And I was like, look, that might happen. But this would be different. Like this J-Huff trade is not the same thing. because Tyrese Halliburton was a lottery pick, and there were legitimate expectations for him when he came into the NBA. Obi Toppin was a lottery pick. There were legitimate expectations for him when he came into the NBA. Aaron Nesmith was a lottery pick. There were legitimate expectations for him when he came into the NBA. Jay Huff, not the case. Undrafted. Played 4 years of college. Was the 61st ranked recruit in his high school class. So it's not like he's a guy who it's not like he's, Amani Bates, who was like the number one player in his class and, whatever. Like that would be different. There is very little pedigree when it comes to Jay Huff, but I think it's going to work because the Pacers have an identity. They know the kind of players that they want. They know the kind of players that they need. They know the kind of players that fit their system. That's why Aaron Nesmith was able to come over and be impactful. It's part of why Obi Toppin was able to come over and be impactful. Like you heard Coach Carlisle say it after one of the Pacer games. He was like, look, we knew what we had in Tyrese Halliburton, and we knew we needed to surround him with guys who could run and shoot. And ever since then, the Pacers have been all about finding guys who can run and shoot. And when you look at their roster, there's a lot of guys on there who can really do that, right? And they understand that, like, they need off guards who can really defend. They need off guards who can handle the ball a little bit, and they have that. They know exactly what they are looking for, okay? Like, if you walk into a grocery store and you have a list, you're in, you're out, it's easy, right? Like, if you know that you're making chicken Alfredo on Tuesday night, then you know that when you walk into Walmart or Aldi or whatever grocery store you want, you know that you got to find chicken, you got to find the noodles, and you got to find Alfredo sauce. That sounds really good, by the way. Right? And then you can grab it and you can go. That's it. Okay? When you have a legitimate plan, it is easier to shop around and find what you need. Building an NBA team or an NFL team or a college basketball roster or whatever, very similar. You have to know what you need. And the Pacers have an identity that allows them to know what they need. It allows them to know that Aaron Nesmith and Obi Toppin can come over and slide in and be impactful. And because Kevin Pritchard and the rest of that Pacers front office know exactly what they're looking for, Jay Huff's probably going to work out. He's probably going to fit in because whatever skill set the Pacers need at the center position, they know what it is. They clearly think that Jay Huff has it, and that's why they brought him over. Now, is Jay Huff going to be enough of a fit and good enough of a player for, to be the starting center on an NBA Finals team? I don't know about that. But, I mean, we're going to find out. But I trust Kevin Pritchard. I trust this front office. They know who they are. They know what they need. And that leads me to believe that Jay Huff is going to fit in pretty well, and he's going to, find a way to be impactful while he's here in Indiana. So, Jay Huff, if you're listening, congrats, man. So glad to have you here. Hopefully, you'll be here for longer than a year. And we'll kind of see how it goes from there. So, very excited to see what Jay Huff looks like when the Pacer season starts up again here in a couple months, because, there is no offseason. The finals, just ended, and we're already back doing all of this the Summer League stuff. And by the way, can we just not get overly excited about the Summer League this year? I love the Summer League. It's like a sports bucket list thing for me. Like, I want to go out there. I want to go to all the games, and I want to watch all of these, young going to be rookies play. Just because I think it's fun. I think it's cool. But, VJ Edgecombe had 28 points the other night, which is fine. That's cool. But once again, it's the Summer League, and he went for 28, and he was 1 of 10 from 3. And there's all these people freaking out about it. It's how about we not? How about we just say, hey, you know what? He had a good game in Summer League. Who cares? I do care, obviously, but it's not the end all be all. I'm very intrigued to see what this, Pacers Summer League team looks like. The roster is interesting. Stephen Ashworth, the little guard out of Creighton, he's on the roster. Robert Baker, center out of Harvard, don't know much about him, I'll be honest. But Buddy Boeheim, though, he's on the roster. He's going to come in and shoot it. Played for, the Oklahoma City Blue, the Thunder's G League team last year. Ray J. Dennis played a little bit for the Pacers last year, guard out of Baylor. A couple other guys that people don't really care about. RJ Felton, undrafted rookie out of East Carolina. Enrique Freeman, who the Pacers took last year, spent some time on the Pacers roster, got a little bit of run. Former MAC Player of the Year, was a guy who walked on and then, just slowly got better. 6'7" forward, incredibly long arms, can protect the rim a little bit because of that. So Enrique Freeman, going to be intrigued to kind of see what he looks like. Johnny Furphy, a guy that the Pacers seem like they're pretty excited about. Obviously a rookie last year, played at Kansas, can shoot it, big, 6'7", can guard a little bit because of that size and length. Like, what is he going to look like? Quentin Jackson, he's on the roster again. I'm excited for Josiah Jordan James just because I like big wings who really try hard on defense, and that is exactly what Josiah Jordan James does. And then a couple other guys worthy of note. Taylon Peter, he was the Pacers, late second-round pick this year, the guy that they took 54th overall, and everyone was like, who? The same guy who uploaded his own highlights to YouTube very shortly before the NBA draft. So what is he going to look like? That'll be kind of fun to watch. And then Tamanaga, the Asian kid out of Nebraska who can really shoot it, can't really defend very well, but man, he can shoot it, and he's always fun to watch. So that is your Indiana Pacer Summer League roster. And we'll see how it goes. Their first game is July 10th. I'm see if I can get Tony East on tomorrow or Thursday to kind of talk a little bit about that team and just kind of who he's intrigued by and who he's not. So hopefully we're going to be able to get Tony East on, or someone who covers the Pacers on, to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about the NFL because I'm excited for the NFL season. I want to talk about year 2 jumps for the Indianapolis Colts. Who needs to get better from their rookie season to their second season? The answer to that is obviously everybody, but there's one player in particular who really needs to improve for the Colts to have a little more success this year than they did last year. I'll tell you who that is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes. Maybe. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thank you for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy's Sports Ticket. Head over there and subscribe. You can also hop in the chat to be part of the conversation. You can also listen or watch on X __ Jonathan Smith to watch the show there. You can also listen on that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you find your apps. Now, Colts camp right around the corner. We're going to get to look at guys like Tyler Warren and JT Tuimoloau, the second round pick out of Ohio State, who's going to hopefully come in and rush the passer at a really high level. Will he? I don't know. I really hope that he does, though. And we're also going to get to look at some of these, second-year rookies or second-year rookies, second-year players for the first time. And, Leatu Latu is the guy that I think everyone is looking at to make that, year one to year two improvement, right? Where he goes from a guy who only played 54% of the Colts snaps last year to a guy who's closer to like 75%. Hopefully he can turn into like a real 3-down defensive lineman that the Colts can consistently rely on, not just to rush the passer, but also to, stop the run game as well. And I hope that he turns into that guy. More specifically, I hope he's a guy who can rush the passer and help the Colts get off the field on third down, right? They need a legitimate pass rusher. They need a guy who's going to flirt with like 11 sacks. Would it be nice if it was more? Absolutely. And when you look at Leatu Latu and the season that he had last year, like leading the Colts in knockdowns and pressures and hurries, it kind of feels like he was close last year. He was just, like half a second late, time and time again, to actually recording the sack. And hopefully with a full year under his belt, being able to go back and watch film based off of every quote, everything that you read about Leatu Latu, like he is a football guy. Apparently, he's going to work really hard. We're going to find out. Okay, he was the 15th pick in the draft last year, and he needs to be a guy. He needs to be. Okay, so hopefully we see him kind of make that improvement. I don't have very much hope for A.D. Mitchell, right? The second round pick last year out of Texas, the guy who famously threw a pick six in a really big spot against the Denver Broncos. And when he was asked about it after the game, his response was, "I did my job," even though like you didn't, because your job was to complete the pass, not throw a pick six to a, defensive lineman, because that's what he did. With that being said, guy's young, not super mature. Maybe he grew up a bit. I hope he did. If he didn't, then we're probably going to see more drops. We're probably going to see more of him cowering when he knows that he's about to get hit. And, I hope that that's not what happened, because like there is talent there. He is fast, running a 4.3. People love throwing out that separation stat, where he, is creating space whenever he's running his routes. That's great. Love that. I think that's important. Obviously, it's hard to catch passes if you're not getting open. But he needed to grow up a little bit. And I'm interested to see, like, how does a potential change in quarterback play impact him? When you look at his speed, it's like, oh, yeah, like he could probably play with Richardson. But I don't know. He may be more of a good route runner type. And if that's the case, then Daniel Jones will probably fit, what Adonai Mitchell brings as a receiver a little bit better than what Anthony Richardson did last year. So most important thing for A.D. Mitchell is like he had to grow up. Did he? I don't know. I'm sure that we're going to find out here at some point, though, during the season. Matt Gonsalves. This was the third round pick for the Colts last year. And you could throw Tanner Bortolini, the fourth round pick out of Wisconsin, who got some snaps at center last year. Those two guys have to make the biggest jumps from their rookie years to now going into their second years in the NFL. Matt Gonsalves probably going to start at offensive guard. Okay, like he's probably going to be the starting right guard. He's going to replace Will Fries, who had a really good year for the Colts last year when he was healthy. Tanner Bortolini got a lot of snaps playing center last year. Like he's probably going to be the starter this year, replacing a guy in Ryan Kelly who was here for a decade. The Colts offensive line wasn't good last year. They allowed the 7th most hurries in the NFL. They were 10th in quarterback hits allowed. And they were 7th in pressures allowed. That's not good. Believe it or not. That's bad. That means that's one of the, bottom 10 offensive lines in the NFL last year. Okay, even if they didn't give up as many sacks as some of those other teams, a lot of that's because Anthony Richardson is a really good athlete. Okay, they gave up way too many pressures and way too many hurries. And they had 2 of their offensive linemen leaving free agency. Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonsalves both have to come back significantly improved because the Colts are going to have a bad quarterback this next year. Whether it's Anthony Richardson, I don't expect him to compete to win an MVP or anything like that. I don't expect Daniel Jones to compete to do anything of the similar. And when you have these lesser quarterbacks, it is imperative to have a legitimately good offensive line in front of them because a good offensive line raises the game of everyone else, especially your quarterback. It is, obviously quarterbacks can help kind of raise the level of play of everyone, but so can offensive lines. And it is so important for the Colts to have a legitimately good offensive line this year. Right? And, it's just kind of frustrating. Chris Ballard, a guy who talks about nothing but the trenches. He hasn't done a good job of putting together a good Colts offensive line for a young quarterback who's still learning, and potentially a guy in Daniel Jones who has to have a good offensive line to survive. So the only way that happens this year is if Matt Gonsalves and Tanner Bortolini both come back significantly better players. Will it happen? I don't know, but we're going to find out. People rave about, Sperano, the Colts offensive line coach, all the time. Hopefully he's found a way to help Tanner Bortolini and Matt Gonsalves improve in the offseason because Matt Gonsalves really struggled to tackle last year when he had to play there. He was better at guard, to be fair to him. Okay, so Bortolini got off to a really good start at center, but I felt like as the year went on, the worse it got for Tanner Bortolini. So we'll see how it goes. Speaking of year 2 players, I feel weird saying this because I don't think it's accurate. But I don't think people are talking about the Bears enough. And I understand that, the Bears won the offseason, talk about the Ben Johnson hire, talk about how they brought in Joe Thuney and how they brought in, Jonah Jackson, 2 really good offensive guards to help beefing up an offensive line that allowed 68 sacks on Caleb Williams last year that led the NFL. And of course, they also hired Ben Johnson, which I can say pretty much for certain that is an upgrade over Matt Eberflus. Okay, if Ben Johnson is half as good as everyone kind of expects him to be, then he's going to be a really good head coach. If he's as good as everyone expects him to be, then hey, watch out. He'll be the best coach in the NFL before you know it. And, the Commanders, I think, are garnering a lot of attention because they made that run to the NFC Championship last year. Jaden Daniels had a great year. People really like the Broncos, Bo Nix, paired with Sean Payton, year 2. They had Dre Greenlaw. They had a little bit more defensive talent to a defense that was pretty good last year. They made the playoffs, lost in the wild card round to the Bills, all that good stuff. And then, Caleb Williams just kind of hanging out. By the way, Caleb Williams, much better than people realized last year. Okay, I get it. He only completed 62.5% of his passes, but he did throw for 3,500 yards. He did throw 20 touchdowns and only 6 interceptions. So, also ran it a little bit as well. So, the Bears, I think, are going to be really good. I just do. And, I'm probably falling for this trap. I like Caleb Williams a lot. Okay, the talent just kind of oozes out of him. Right, more talented than Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix. The issue last year was in part the offensive line. The other issue was Caleb Williams, the fact that he didn't get rid of the ball quite fast enough. And that is where bringing in a guy like Ben Johnson is going to help the most. He coached Jared Goff way up. When Jared Goff was playing quarterback for the Rams, Sean McVay would pop in his helmet before the snap and tell him where to throw the football. And then, that doesn't work when you're playing against Bill Belichick and the Patriots because they're smarter than everyone else, and they got into their defense after, or they showed what defense they were in after, the headset connection gets cut with about 15 seconds left on the play clock. And then, the Rams score 3 points in that Super Bowl and they lose. And then the Rams are like, we are trading Jared Goff to the Lions for Matthew Stafford. So Jared Goff, and he goes and, he's been with Ben Johnson and his hand no longer has to be held. Ben Johnson was able to legitimately coach that dude and help that dude get better at the line of scrimmage. And he's hopefully going to be able to do the same thing with Caleb Williams and the rest of this Bears offense. Maybe if he can get Caleb Williams to get rid of the ball just a little bit quicker, then that'll do numbers for his actual stats and also for that ugly sack number of 68 sacks on the season. And also, if you do that, then that he's not having to be Superman as much, which is something he tried to do a little bit too often last year. Okay, offensively, we know they have weapons. Rome Odunze going into year 2. They add Colston Loveland with the 10th pick. They're paying DJ Moore a lot of money to play wide receiver. They add a couple offensive linemen that are upgrades. They draft an offensive tackle, Ozzie Trapilo. I'm assuming that's how you say it, out of Boston College in the second round. We'll see if he's an upgrade or not. Rookie offensive tackles can struggle just a little bit. So we'll see how it goes, but I am keeping my eye on the Chicago Bears. Last year I gave out 2 over-under win total bets. They both hit, the Broncos and the Commanders. We'll see if I can hit 2 more this year. And I'm thinking about the Bears. I am. People may be on them just a little bit too much, though, so we may have to go in another direction. But the Bears, I do find interesting. Better head coach, a quarterback who's hopefully going to get better, and an improved offensive line is really hard to ignore. I do like the Bears as a fringe playoff team out in the NFC. But in order for that to happen, Caleb Williams has to come back a better player. So that'll do it here on the Real Jonathan Smith Show. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to tune into the show. I greatly appreciate it as always. The Dan Dockett Show is coming your way next noon to 3. The Indy Sports Ticket app. Go download it so you can listen to the Dan Dockett Show. We got Seth Greenberg coming on at 1 o'clock, and it's going to be good. You don't want to miss it. Thank you again for tuning in. I'll be back on the air tomorrow from 10 to noon, and I will talk to you